Hi, Yolanda.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Oh, how are you?
Good. We're all so busy, right? So
Mhm.
just trying to remember to do that self-care and meditate when necessary and just take those deep breaths. How are
Yeah,
you doing?
yeah, trying to keep up with everything you just said.
Yes.
Especially now that you're our last session for this weekend. So yeah, getting some sleep and preparing
Yes.
for our sessions for part two. So yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm so proud of you and Ellie and Lorena and everyone that's, working on doing this. It's an amazing undertaking and just feel so privileged and humbled and honored to, be invited to be a panelist here. So I'm excited about this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and accepting our invitation.
Oh,
Yeah, we're glad
most
to have you here.
definitely. Well, it's just so important, right? I mean, especially now with everything that's going on.
Mhm.
So I don't need to do anything for Facebook, right? That's on your side.
Yes, I will be handling the Facebook Live. I will be handling the recording
Okay.
because we also plan to post the videos on YouTube to make it more accessible and to reach a broader audience.
Yes.
Um, so I'll be handling that, and
Okay.
Eli will be your moderator. So he'll be like introducing you, closing out the session. But
Perfect.
I'm going to be more behind the scenes. And as our planning committee members enter the session, they will also be co-hosts because we have it set up with a waiting room. So myself and the co-host will be admitting people.
Okay. So I just planned for a straight presentation of 45 minutes.
Okay.
So I left about 15 minutes there for question and answer or any concerns. Is that okay? Is that format okay? Or
Yes, that's perfect. Yeah.
okay, okay. Yeah, because I can stop at any point if someone really has a pressing question. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah. Okay.
But okay, well, good. So then I just need to do my thing on this end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome. And Eli will also be monitoring the Facebook page for those who will be joining us on Facebook. That
you. Okay,
way they can be included somehow too if they're not able to join via the Zoom link.
wonderful. Okay. So then I will be sharing my screen. I do have a presentation, so that's not a problem
Yeah. Let,
okay.
let me add you as a, I'm going to pause the recording.
Okay, so we're good to go? Yes, Kathy?
Going live right now. This one
Oh,
may
okay.
have to do a couple options. I'll let you know once we're live.
Yeah, thank you. It shows us the, oh, I think it throws a message at the top. So thank you everyone for being here. We're just working to put the session live on our Facebook page, SAS Facebook page, for those that have access.
All right, going live now. Thank you all for your patience as we navigate technology, and my computer is slow, so that's why it's taking a few minutes longer.
Yeah, we're still learning as we go. We were just discussing how Zoom has so many options, and one of them being, syncing so you can be live on other platforms. But sometimes it could be a little tricky to actually, you think it's just enable, disable, but okay, so there you go. Now I see we're live streaming live on Facebook, so we can get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Eli Diaz. I will be the moderator for this session. The title of this session is Bridging the Digital Divide of Distance Learning for Students of Color, presented by Profesora Yolanda Varela-Gonzalez. And the purpose of this session is to discuss the barriers associated with online learning and teaching. We will cover questions like, what are the challenges students of color face as educational institutions employ distance learning? And also, will students overcome these obstacles, or will more students of color fall between the cracks of the digital divide? And a little bit about our facilitator, Profesora Varela-Gonzalez. She has taught underserved and underrepresented students in the Los Angeles County for nearly 30 years. She was born in El Paso, Texas, to Mexican immigrants, and she understands the trauma of childhood poverty following the death of her father. Raised by a luchadora single mother in the San Francisco Bay Area, Profesora Varela-Gonzalez became an educator-warrior for social justice. Her pedagogy empowers students to tell their stories through 21st century educational practices that promote racial equality and educational equity. And real quick, before she begins, as a friendly reminder, if you could please leave your camera off and your mics on mute, microphones. And during the Q&A session, you can turn them on to share your input. Like I mentioned earlier, we are also live on Cresea's Facebook page, so you can engage through there as well. I want to go ahead and introduce Profesora Yolanda Varela-Gonzalez. Adelante.
Muchas gracias, Eli. First of all, I'd just like to say that I am very happy to be here with you all, and I'm humbled and honored to be a part of Critical Race Studies and Education Association Summer Webinar 2020. I was happily invited a few weeks back by Eli, who I've known as a social justice warrior. We've been on the front lines on every issue imaginable here in Southern California, and knowing him as a guerrero and watching him as a student grow into the person that he is academically has just really filled me with pride. And he has been that educational guerrero, just yielding that machete to overcome those obstacles, because they are there for our students of underserved, underrepresented students, not only K-12, but community college, universities. So thank you, Eli, and Doctora Gastelum, muchas gracias. I applaud you for this work, for this summer webinar, and for all of the planning committee. Lorena, thank you for this opportunity. So thank you very much. I'd like to just start out by reiterating that yes, that my pedagogy in teaching is to empower students to tell their stories through 21st century educational practices that promote racial equality and educational equity. And my proudest moment in those 30 years teaching social justice through project-based learning and design thinking was when my students won the Los Angeles County Office of Education's Digital Voice Awards for their presentations entitled Immigration, Trails of Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And so this was a very personal project. And if you know what project-based learning is, it's all encompassing. So you're addressing all of your curricular areas and then some within this unit of learning. And so this one was on immigration. This was in 2016. And so obviously 2016 was a year that a lot of us wish we could roll back, right? But it is what it is. So my students started seeing the news and hearing the news, and immigration became this huge issue as they watched children being caged and families being separated, and a lot of them with undocumented parents, they themselves either being DACA students or undocumented themselves. So this was a real issue that we would discuss, and we decided as a classroom that this would be our year-long area of study. So again, project-based learning builds all of the mathematics, the science, the social science, everything into that unit. And so they did their due diligence, and they, made infographics, and they did surveys, and they presented to the public, and they just, research statistics and information. But the final piece was for them to interview their families, their parents, and the journey that their parents had been through to immigrate to this country. And it was interesting to find that a lot of parents had not shared their story, obviously very painful stories for many of them. And in speaking with the parents, I did tell them that their students were aware of everything that was happening and were hearing stories of immigration, and that I felt that they had the maturity. So with the trust and confidence of the parents, the students interviewed their parents and got these amazing stories. And so they did present these in a beautiful presentation. Once they'd won the award, we had a beautiful auditorium at our historical school, just a beautiful arena for them to present and for families and community to be there. But that was one of my proudest moments, because as a 21st century educator, I do think that employing the devices and all of that internet access for social justice really is pivotal and really is key. So thank you so much. You are modeling that through your work, and I am, again, humbled and honored to be a part of this. Thank you so much. So according to the Education Trust West April 2020 report, the digital and technology resource divide is not a new phenomenon facing school-age children of color and children experiencing poverty. A recent study found that nationally, around 17% of children are unable to complete their homework due to limited internet access. This digital divide, and often resulting homework gap, mirrors trends in California, where about 1 in 6 school-age children lack access to the internet at home. These numbers grow for the state's most vulnerable children: students of color, low-income students, English learners, students with disabilities, and homeless youth. And again, my focus has been K through 12, but I know that this stands true for community college, university, and postgraduate students as well. There are issues right now during this crisis within the pandemic that the state needs to address and is attempting to address. So this is the education equity and crisis, the digital divide. So even before COVID-19, students from the most disadvantaged communities often depended on public libraries, fast food restaurants, coffee shops, and Wi-Fi enabled school buses to access internet. And this is the crisis that we're facing, is that we do not have the infrastructure right now for our rural students, for students who don't have the economic means, for students whose districts have not been able to get enough of those digital devices and hotspots. So it is creating a crisis within a crisis. And as we look to starting school, my particular district starts this coming week, and within the next coming weeks, most of California will be online with distance learning. We will still have students who do not have access. And there are just a myriad of issues with this, and something that it behooves us all to address. So the equity implications of these gaps and impacts on learning have been brought into sharper focus as schools and districts across the state grapple with the COVID-19 crisis. And I would like to mention that anywhere where you see underlined text, that is a hyperlink to the video or to the article where you can gather more information. So as reported by the Sacramento Bee, California is short 1 million laptops and hotspots for kids as of July 22nd. In March, 1.2 million didn't have devices or hotspots. That's 20% of K through 12 population. So again, consider that that's 20% of K through 12. Now let's factor in our community college students, our university students, our adult ed students. So California needs 700,000 devices and 300,000 hotspots, according to the California Department of Education. And they are indeed scrambling, and they've got corporate sponsorships that are providing more laptops and hotspots, but I am certain that there will be students ill-equipped to begin distance learning. And in fact, one educator from a Sacramento school district said that their school definitely wouldn't have anything available for students younger than 3rd grade. So they are going to paper and pencil, and he'll be phone calling students to make sure that they're understanding the work. But you can see how something like that is already affecting the educational equality and the equity that we have in our California state constitution for education. So again, my presentation is relative to California, and I have no doubt that numbers would be very similar in other states as well. Nationally, this is a crisis. But are devices and Wi-Fi enough to bridge the real digital divide? So let's presume, base case scenario, that we are able to get devices, these electronic devices, these Chromebooks, laptops, and these hotspots, internet service. Let's just suppose that we are, because there are a lot of good things happening, right? We know Google's got loons that hopefully they're going to dispatch to rural areas. Let's assume that there's white space and there are all these different innovations that will, in best case scenario, be made available to those students. There are corporations that are providing free internet to public housing, and there are all sorts of different things. But let's assume that all of our avenues have these distance learning tools. Is that really going to be enough to bridge the real digital divide? And what is the digital divide that students of color face that their white counterparts or upper middle class counterparts do not have to deal with? So to talk about that, we really have to look at the COVID-19 crisis and the numbers and how they affect our communities of color. So here, while we rush to get devices and provide hotspots to students, the COVID-19 crisis is affecting communities of color disproportionately, exposing even more light upon the need for trauma-informed social emotional awareness. And this is something that throwing devices and Wi-Fi at is not going to address. So this is why I think it's especially important looking at this chart to recognize that our students, for numerous reasons, having those tools may not even be in a position to really learn at their optimum ability. So this is a chart that demonstrates how many times more likely different racial groups are to have died of COVID-19 than white Americans. So you can see that for Blacks, 3.7 times more likely than white Americans, Indigenous 3.5, Pacific Islanders 2.8, Latinos 2.5, and Asian 1.4 times more likely to die of COVID than white Americans. But I've inserted articles. Remember, anything underlined has an article relative to that topic. And the reason that I've inserted here, for Blacks, it says nearly 23% of reported COVID deaths in the US are African American. I would venture to say that that's higher. There's an article attached that you can look at later on your own. I want you to wrap your head around this. The Navajo Nation has more COVID deaths than 13 states combined. Wrap your head around that. And so that is something that just really, when I read that, I had to look at the article and the numbers, and it was appalling. It was just heartbreaking. For Pacific Islanders in LA County, they have the highest rate of infection of any ethnic group. And so there's an article from the LA Times to show that Samoans and Pacific Islanders have been very disproportionately hit. And then for Latinos, how accurate are the numbers for Latinos? So I've inserted a note in the middle here that says government race category forces Latinos to choose among white, Black or African American, Asian, American Indian, and Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander. There is nothing for a Latino to check except the lonely box marked other. Latinos are literally othered in these official government counts. So I know that when I was young, I was taught, well, you just check the box for white. I'm looking at myself going, okay, I'm white? All right, you're telling me I'm white, but something tells me I'm not. So, but that, even on my birth certificate, it says that I'm of the white race. And so quite a few years back, I decided for myself that I would rather count myself, and we've since, proven with our genetic testing that my family is more American Indian and Indigenous. Mexican Indigenous. So I now, very proudly, I would much rather check American Indian than to claim that I am of the white race, because that misrepresents, for federal funding and for other purposes, our population. And so I would also say that the numbers are not accurate for Latinos because so many undocumented people do not want to present themselves to a hospital for obvious reasons, right? Right now we have a crisis in the Central Valley of California with farm workers, and hundreds of thousands have been infected. And so, of course, you know, their patrones did not take care of them by speaking truth and letting them know that others were becoming infected. And so I don't believe that the numbers for Latinos is accurate. And then when we look at our Asian brothers and sisters, 1.4 times more likely to have died of COVID-19 than white Americans. So amid the death of COVID-19 to the Asian community, they're also being blamed. They're being scapegoated by a president who insists upon racializing this coronavirus pandemic. He calls it the China virus. It's this article that is linked there is about the discrimination and bias that so many Asians are feeling. Now, remember, that trickles down. So there are students in our classrooms that are feeling ashamed and guilt-ridden that somehow they are associated with the start of this. So it's just appalling that we have a leader who would think that somehow that's okay. So we have our students, I know personally, we have students at my school whose parents have died of COVID-19. So we know that those students are in trauma. We know that we have families who have relatives and immediate family members who are infected with COVID-19. So that all adds to the trauma of what our students are having to deal with at a much higher rate than white American students. And so it behooves us to understand how trauma plays out for our students and how we must best understand childhood trauma, especially as we try to unfold distance learning, because teachers have always been on the front lines. A student comes in, you see bruises, you see evidence. We're mandated reporters. We have to report. Well, guess what? We can't see that anymore. We're not there. So we have to put systems in place where we're able to monitor our students, where we're able to Zoom with families to see how they're doing, and have a conversation, honest, open conversation, where students who are exhibiting behavioral issues or who seem to withdrawn or exhibiting different evidence of trauma, how are we going to do that? What are the systems that are in place? And I'm proud to say that I am in a district that is really taking this at the forefront of our new school year. So we've had quite a bit of training on this. But moving on to childhood trauma. This is quite an eye-opening chart here. So childhood trauma. Children suffering from childhood trauma are 2 times more likely to develop depression, 3 times more likely to develop anxiety disorders, and childhood trauma is identified as an event that a child finds overwhelmingly distressing or emotionally painful, often resulting in lasting mental and physical effects. So you can see the long-term impacts here. It affects the perception of reality, takes away a sense of safety, wires brain to expect danger, increases stress hormones flowing through the body, triggers fight, fright, or freeze response, creates a sense of helplessness, creates relationship problems, results in serious behavior problems. And so a lot of the common causes are listed here in the lower left. And then it's very important to understand that trauma affects brain development. The initial trauma of a young child may go underground, but it will return to haunt us. And that was James Garbarino. So we know through brain research that trauma affects different parts of our brain. So the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking center, is underactivated when under trauma. There are difficulties concentrating and learning. The anterior cingulate cortex, the emotion regulator, is when it's underactivated due to stress. There are difficulties with managing emotions. And then the amygdala, the fear center, is overactivated. So difficulty feeling safe or calming down or even sleeping. So childhood trauma is something that it behooves us all as educators or even as students for ourselves to understand. And so how do we measure trauma? How do we measure trauma in children and adults? How do we measure trauma? So one of the measurements that is being used and has been in use is called the ACEs. And the ACEs, the acronym is Adverse Childhood Experiences. And now, the ACEs was a study of 17,000 plus middle-class white Americans with post-secondary education and white-collar jobs. So you may say, well, how does this apply to communities of color, to students of color? Well, it was found that it does translate. However, the way that we address the disparities in childhood trauma upon community of colors, such as incarceration, single mother household, higher rates of death, overall health issues from disease, addiction, and mental health issues, recognizing that children of color suffer from trauma at much higher rates than their white counterparts. So I have some videos embedded in this presentation. I won't present any of the others, but as you go to those places that are underlined, you'll be able to watch videos and read articles. But I do want to share this one about the ACEs, because I think it is an important measurement that everyone should be aware of. And I do apologize. I'm in the hills.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. And Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn more about interrupting the cycle of adversity and improving health and well-being for the next generation, please visit kpjrfilms.co.
So I hope that you are impacted by that, especially given that communities of color suffer from again, so much more exposure to these traumas. I mean, I have students who don't have either parent present. They're either in foster care or being cared for by guardians. Whether you're at the university level, community college, we have students that are homeless. We have so many students that are food insecure, so they depend on the schools. I have students who only eat breakfast and lunch at school, and we have to send what we call snack packs home for them. It breaks my heart. So why should the question of bridging the digital divide be prefaced with a holistic approach to distance learning that takes into account trauma-informed learning? Simply put, students cannot learn and teachers will not reach them until their basic needs are met. So hopefully most of you have read about Maslow, and Maslow conducted studies of a hierarchy of basic needs for humans. What are the things that human beings need to be able to become self-actualized? And we always say in education that we need to Maslow before we can bloom. And Bloom's taxonomy is a reference to educational skills and the ability to ultimately create. But the Maslow's hierarchy is primordial, and it relates to the physiological needs, which are the basic needs in life. Are we clothed? Do we have food? Do we have a roof over our heads? And then the next tier would be a sense of security and stability. Do we feel safe and secure? The next would be a sense of connection and passion, and that means that you feel like you belong to something. You belong to a family, you belong to a community. That sense of belonging will lead to, along with safety and security and physiological needs, will lead to self-esteem, that self-confidence and a sense of achievement, that I'm great, I can do these things, I can learn, and with educators who promote this and make sure that these hierarchy needs are met, then students will be able to self-actualize. So when we transfer this over to Bloom's taxonomy, we can see that at the very lowest level, students need to be able to remember and recall, but memory is something that students who are hungry, students who are not having their basic needs met, won't even be able to do that. They won't be able to focus. So as a result, they're not going to be able to understand or apply, analyze, evaluate, all of those higher learning skills that students need to be able to become creators that are going to be able to affect change in their own learning and in the world. So this is very important. We need to Maslow before we bloom. So what are the desired outcomes? So as we face distance learning, and we know that teachers aren't having the ability to see students in person, at least for now, hopefully within a couple of months, we'll be able to see our students, hopefully in the safest way possible. Obviously, we're all for safety first. But the desired outcomes would be to establish a common language around trauma-informed social emotional learning and multifaceted support. So that means that we're talking about this, that we're addressing it, and that we'll have multifaceted support. So first of all, teacher and parent are the front line. What's going on? What do we notice in the student? And again, this is all levels, kindergarten to postgraduate. What is going on with our students? What is it that is rendering them incapable or facing obstacles in their learning? We need to deepen our shared understanding of how trauma impacts learning and why this holistic approach is needed. So we need to reflect and make an actionable commitment towards the following key takeaways. Ensure that all members of the school community effectively support all students to feel safe physically, socially, emotionally, and academically. Address students' needs in holistic ways, taking into account their relationships, self-regulation, academic competence, and physical and emotional well-being. Explicitly connect students to the school community and provide multiple opportunities for students to fully participate. Support staff with capacity to work together as a team with a sense of shared responsibility for every student. Foster a school culture that anticipates and adapts to the ever-changing needs of our students and the surrounding community. And this can and will be done in distance learning. It has to be. And it behooves any educators who aren't doing this, or any districts that aren't, to face the consequences. Because as many of you know, Gabriel Fernandez fell between the cracks. And hopefully all of you know that name. So what is it that we want students to be able to accomplish once their basic needs have been met and they're in a position to be able to actually create and be self-actualized? Well, 21st century learners are global citizens. They recognize that their learning is for a worldwide global purpose of social justice, that we're all here to make the world a better place, whether it's in our own little corner or globally affecting change. So you can see Ethan Zuckerman's quotation that over the next 10 years, I hope to see a wave of new platforms consciously designed to evoke different civic behaviors. We need mass innovation in design of social tools that help us bridge fragmentation and polarization. We need to bring diversity into our media landscapes and help find common ground between disparate groups. With these as conscious design goals, technology could be a powerful positive force for civic change. If we don't take this challenge seriously and assume that we're stuck with mass market tools, we won't see positive civic outcomes from technological tools. So they are just tools. A Chromebook, a laptop, a hotspot, internet. They are only as good as the educators that are teaching students to use them for social justice causes. So if an educator is only throwing worksheets at students through the laptop, then all they've done is replace paper and pencil with a laptop. And if there isn't engagement that is leading to critical thinking and higher level analysis, then our students will not arrive at what should be the pinnacle of global citizenship and best use of these digital tools. So there is an article here down at the bottom, you can see it's underlined there, where it says experts predict more digital innovation by 2030 aimed at enhancing democracy. And with everything that is at the forefront of our experience right now, we know that our students are being exposed to very serious issues of social justice. And so it really does mean that every educator has that social responsibility to address this somehow, whether through their social studies curriculum or through project-based learning and design thinking. It has to be that we don't implement technology as a tool during times of crisis, but that we are teaching students what we should have been teaching them 10 years ago, that this digital device is really my window to the world to become a participating citizen in a global effort for social justice. And I will close this presentation with a quote from our Congressman John Lewis, who just recently passed. He says I was so inspired by Dr. King that in 1956, with my brothers and sisters and first cousins, I was only 16 years old, we went down to the public library trying to check out some books, and we were told by the librarian that the library was for whites only and not for coloreds. It was a public library. I never went back to that public library again until July 5th, 1998. By this time, I'm in the Congress for a book signing of my book, Walking with the Wind. So that's what we want for our students. We want them to one day be able to come back from wherever they started and say, I changed my life. I broke the cycle. So rest in power, Congressman John Lewis. Thank you for your leadership, service, and legacy. Civil rights leader, social justice leader, good troublemaker, because we have to get into that good trouble to really affect change. And as always, Black Lives Matter and Brown Lives Matter. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And it does get emotional for me, so you could see that. And as Eli knows, because we've been connected for so many years, he knows that I am very passionate in this process. And emotion does come to the forefront. This is about our students, about our future.
Thank you, Profesora Yolanda. No, I mean, you're definitely right. You know, all of these wrongs that are currently happening, you know, it's, how can we not, you know, get emotional and not want to take part in, get involved and, you know, create change. Thanks again for, you know, a thought-provoking presentation, and, you know, the all of the data that you present and the different angles that you come at, you know, it's definitely it's that intersectionality of the issue and how it affects students, you know, it's real. So before I share any more of my thoughts, does anyone have any questions or comments on the topic? You can either post it here on the chat, or you can unmute yourself or post it on the Facebook page. So I'll give it a couple minutes if in case anyone wants to chime in. Anyone that would like to, you know, share their experiences, if you're going to be teaching, or if you're currently going through this transition from face-to-face to online teaching, you would like to add any of your input?
So I am putting the link to the presentation in the chat for anyone who would like to download that to their own drive and have for future reference. I know it is a lot to digest, but I think it's something that is not only relevant to those of us who are in education, but really there's a lot of it that even is applicable to ourselves and to our families, to our social circles.
Thank you. I was actually, that was going to be one of my questions, you know, since you mentioned that you would make it available. Somebody commented here. I don't know if you have access to the comments, Yolanda.
Yes, and the person was just referencing, they're apologizing for not commenting. No, don't apologize. This is a lot, but they did say that this is something that they're just starting. It's from Tammy, that she's just starting to think about. And Thank you so much. No, this is a labor of love, as it is for all of the organizing committee. This is an effort to just make sure that that divide is bridged, whether, you know, whatever the arena may be. So thank you, Tammy, for your kind words.
No, and definitely. I mean, I agree with Tammy. Sometimes, you know, I mean, I'm not a teacher. I'm on the student side of things. So last semester, you know, we for half of the semester they said, okay, I guess we got to go, you know, online. And since many other things were happening, at first I was going to class. You know, I was setting up my laptop, but then it's like, oh, the context. How does it look? You know, I don't have a space to study at home. That's why most of the times I would just stay at home. I mean, I do have a laptop, but I have spotty internet, which would drop. So I would rather, you know, just do my work at school. Now that I have to stay at home, then, you know, I have other issues now. Due to personal circumstances and you know, my status, I was like, I kind of don't have time for school anymore. So I wasn't going to my classes for like 6 weeks, and I just presented, you know, some of the tests, and I really struggled even with the comprehensive exam. And I hate, you know, that I'm bringing the the focus back to me, but it's just like that was one part of the reality, you know, that students will experience. That even though, like you mentioned, even for postgraduate students, which is
Right.
at the level that I'm in, that I was rather, I was still struggling, you know, and I was also being a non-traditional student. I was definitely missing that connection, you know, that
Mhm.
face-to-face, that sense of um, belonging and sense of, you know, oh, these are
Yes.
my people. You know, the master's program I was in, it's social justice,
Mhm.
educational justice, you know, focus. So being away at home, I kind of felt like, well, here I am in my little bubble with my own problems, and I was missing that connection.
Right. And a lot of professors, unfortunately, are not very forgiving and are not being as sensitive to different, you know, experiences that their students are in the midst of. So, you know, I've heard things like, well, our professor is requiring us all to have our video cameras on at all times because then, you know, they think that we're not participating or we're not listening. Well, that isn't the case. We have to assume goodwill. You know, some students, university, are having a bad, as simple as having a bad hair day and don't want to be seen. Others are in trauma and don't want to be seen. You know, so you know, there has to be a certain level of understanding and forgiveness on the part of professors, teachers, to recognize that just because a camera is off doesn't mean that students are not engaged. And maybe looking beyond just that fixed class time, how else can I make myself available to my students? So, but thank you for sharing your experience. It is difficult. My daughter's in her undergraduate work, and you know, she's struggled. She had, you know, she works part time, but it was a very difficult. And she got to the point where she said, "I don't know if I can finish this because some of the professors are just being very, you know, unreasonable." And I had to agree with her many times. It was. We have a comment from is it Chanlin? Chanlin? And she said, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable. I'm a student of speech therapy and want to make my services more accessible. Yes, yes. We have our students that have IEPs. Those are individualized education plans. They are within our special ed department. And you have certainly got your work cut out for you, certainly. And that's a whole nother piece of the puzzle that I thought about touching upon, but no, I mean, you know, special ed teachers, you are an amazing kind of teacher. You really are what I would consider to be the true heroes in education, because you know, I have had my share of what we would consider, you know, RSP students. They just need a little bit of resource, whether for speech or some, you know, emotional counseling. But we had a special day class at the school that I'm at, and that's where you really see the heroics that are involved. And at least from what I see, our district is making that effort to reach out. So thank you, Chanlin, for what you do. Seriously, I am in awe always. Thank you.
Since you touched on this topic for, you know, speech therapy students, do you know how some of the services, some of that support that's provided face-to-face, how that can come about, on a online session?
Well, in the spring, it was through Zoom. The speech therapist had to have a personal Zoom session with my one student who has his speech issue, and that seemed to be very successful. Now, I do anticipate that as schools start feeling safer to get back, it will be one-on-one, obviously, with PPE in place, that protective equipment. But yes, it's very, very difficult, especially for our most needy special ed students. It's going to be very difficult. And of course, we don't want to ever relegate students to a corner, because we're afraid to provide certain services. So it is difficult.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else that would like to comment or share their thoughts, feel free to do so by either unmuting yourself or posting it in the chat.
Janelle Ortiz, you look familiar to me. I don't know where you went to school, but you look very much like a former student. Now imagine teaching almost 30 years, classes as big as 30. I've taught so many students, and I run into them you wouldn't even imagine in all sorts of places. But yes, Janelle looks familiar. Well, thank you to all of you for having attended this session. And I am available. Oh, from La Puente. Yes, Janelle, maybe our paths did cross somewhere. It's interesting. I have a photographic memory. And so I have, I don't know if it's a gift or a curse, but once I've seen someone, that image is burned into. So Janelle, we'll have to hopefully at some point talk to see where you've been to school. I've subbed everywhere when I first started teaching in different districts and everything. But I'm going to give you give all of you my district email, and if you ever have questions or would like to share information, please feel free to contact me. That's my professional email. And then for my personal, again, feel free to contact me at whichever platform you're most comfortable with. And I am superyoli@yahoo.com.
I'd like to comment or ask a question. Thank you for your presentation and prefacing the social emotional learning and trauma-informed practices. And when doing this work as educators, I'm also based in California, and I've been talking to a lot of county offices and district liaisons that work with students experiencing housing instability and homelessness. And it was already an issue, right? And I think something that I've been hearing is how can these educators, first of all, there needs to be additional training with these frameworks when serving students and families, right? I hear a lot of, you need to be a social worker in order to do this sometimes, and students don't get this training in teacher ed programs. But I guess what is just your advice to educators that are in the front line and are having to respond quickly to just emergency situations, when helping students that are experiencing trauma, loss, death, in such the rate that we're experiencing globally?
Yes, thank you for that question, Lorena. I would like to say that, first of all, teachers are not just teachers. We are nurses, we are psychologists, we are social workers, we are mentors, we fulfill so many aspects of our students' lives that they don't often get anywhere else. And it does behoove the teacher prep programs in our university systems to build this into our curriculum for new teachers. I think that our district does a great job, and I know that most California districts are addressing it, but I agree that it does have to be a part of the curriculum, just like ethnic studies must be a part of the curriculum, right? But I would say that for anyone who does not have that window through whatever their teacher prep program is or their district, because there may be districts that are not adequately, I would say do your research. Just like we all do, and this is part of being a digital citizen. If you are a university student, if you are at community college, you have the skills. Go out and join the professional organizations of. I have an amazing link from the Latinx mental health professionals, and I just didn't, I didn't get a chance to import that into this presentation, but there's that organization. There are so many organizations geared toward communities of color that are doing this training and this work, and attend webinars like this one. I really am humbled and honored to be a part of this webinar and to be providing hopefully some of that information. But yes, I think that it definitely needs to be a part of the teacher prep curriculum, and that we all need to make sure that our institutions provide that. Thank you, Lorena.
Thank you for that answer as well. Anyone else? Any last minute comments or responses? We have about 5 minutes left. And also thank you for providing your contact information. That's definitely helpful, because sometimes, again, we haven't really, thought ahead or understand that, hey, it's already August, in many places, school is about to start in a couple weeks.
That's right.
And, for the quarter system universities, it's going to start in about 6 weeks, but still, there's a lot of preparation that's still needed.
That's right. And talk to your neighbors, talk to your community, and find out, ask students, have you gotten your devices? Have you, we all have to be that change we want to see, so that if we are told by someone in our community, I haven't gotten anything yet, do they even know how to reach out to their district? Do they even know what they need to do? So we need to be the advocates for our students. And, I think that I just want to make it very clear that I am available as a resource to anyone if they think that their district would like a presenter, or if you even just have a community of learners that you would like me to present to. I would be honored, and this is part of our social justice work. Eli Diaz, I am infinitely grateful to you, and watching your growth throughout the many years that we have been social justice warriors. I am just very proud to see that you are in the hands of Doctora Kathy Gastelum, who is obviously doing that such important work with the Critical Race Studies in Education Association. So thank you all for participating. Thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to being an active member of CASEA.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. I'm definitely, definitely looking to continue learning from you, from Doctora Gastelum. Lorena is also a PhD student, so I'm definitely looking to surround myself with these great guerreras and great femtors and mentors that that I know I'm gonna need and to grow, personally, but also as a community. So again, thank you for sharing your contact information, your availability, and if there's no other comments, let me see here. Okay, well, again, I guess we can wrap it up. You have Profesora Yolanda's contact information if you'd like to reach out to her. It's always good, to know individuals like herself that are not only involved, in academia at the district level, but also on the streets. If you check her platforms, hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot, but if you check especially her Facebook, you can see, the different actions, the different type of work that she does also in the community or on the streets, like we call it. And that's where, we get to make these other great connections as well. For now, I would like to thank everyone for joining us for this webinar. Please feel free to register for next week's sessions. We do have 4 on Friday and 4 on Saturday, including our business session, and that would be on cresea.org. And any last words that you'd like to share, Profesora?
Just that, be the change that you want to see.
Well, thank you so much. You took it from my lips, basically. I was just going to wish everyone to, enjoy the rest of your weekend, rather, and remember that we are the change.
That's right.